But so I'm just going to do an introduction about myself. My name is Gail. I hope everyone is well, and I just want to thank you all for inviting me to be here. Thank you, Elder Emma, as well for the invitation. I already know some of you, but for those that don't know me, like I said, my name is Gail, and I live in Portugal, but I belong to the Brazilian ministry. But I'm actually originally from South Africa. So I'm happy to study with you this morning, and I pray that my topic will benefit all of us. I'm trying not to be nervous, so please bear with me. Let us just be humble. Let us just enjoy ourselves, share our ideas. Please feel free to participate and to interact. We are here to learn together. I've been studying about toxic masculinity and also reading feminist books. And that is what we will speak about this morning. I'm sure you know a lot about it as well, about this topic. So please share your thoughts. And before I dive into this, let us pray. Lord, we want to thank you for the Sabbath. I want to thank you for this group in the UK. Bless each and every one. May your Holy Spirit be with us, lead us and guide us and strengthen us. May we have humble hearts, open minds. Help us in our daily lives, Lord. You know what each and every one of us go through. Continue strengthening this movement. Help our leadership as well. And that we may all be in one accord. Continue being with us throughout this day. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. So, before I dive into the horrible stories of some untold barbarian events that actually ruined women's lives, I would like to speak about patriarchy. So I hope that we don't get to a point to think, oh, not patriarchy again, oh, not sexism again. And because our test is really about gender, and sometimes we just, we get sidetracked and we think of other things. But I think the importance is to continue also focusing on gender being our test as well. So I would like to speak about patriarchy. It is said to be deeply rooted. We've heard that many times. In general, men are defined as strong. And just before I carry on, y'all can y'all can participate in chat. The chat is open. Y'all can raise up your hands. Please participate. If you want to interrupt me, please do so as well. So generally, men are defined as the strong ones, the protectors, the providers. They accumulate the riches. They occupy the positions of powers, for example, in politics and in life. And to have a voice that needs to be listened to and opinions heard. So this is that patriarchal system, some of the things. Now, the opposite to women. Women are often looked at as they're the fragile ones. They're delicate. They're the ones to be faithful to their husbands. They're the ones to be good mothers. They've got to be these good mothers. They've got to be these excellent housewives, not to speak loud, and that you need a man to be happy. All these manosphere behaviors, misogyny that we hear about daily. So if a woman, for example, raises her voice, she is said to want to be in charge. Oh, she just wants to be in charge. She wants to be a man. She wants to be like a man. They're the ones that are only supposed to be loud. Misogyny is so rooted in society that it is understood as normal. For example, we saw in July at the RNC, the Republicans' misogyny. As I said, this was in full display. It was said, this is a man's world. Donald Trump arrives. He arrives at the convention. What does he arrive to? He arrives to James Brown classic. This is a man's world. The message was clear. Trump's Republican Party and the vision it has for the future of the USA. And I would like to say the world is a man's world. We know for centuries it has been a man's world. It has been since the fall of humanity. So between the first presidential campaign of Donald Trump and the arrival of the Me Too movement in 2017, we see that progressive activists and social critics, they increasingly warned us about something called toxic masculinity. So we read there was many things out there. The term, vaguely academic in nature, referred to traditional norms of manliness. So what do we have here? Emotional stoicism, physical aggressiveness, and their potentially dangerous consequences. There were certainly many examples of appalling male behavior, and these were taken as expressions of deeper problems. So as we continue diving into this, I also don't want to just speak out. Like I said, I would like you also to participate. But even as the condemnation of toxic masculinity commanded public assent, there were signs of uncertainty. This was understandable, though, given that toxic masculinity seemed to actually encompass a wide range of offenses, from sexual violence, we saw, to disrespectful manners, to mere competitiveness, power. So in the years since, the confusion has only intensified. It's just intensified. If this of Mr. Trump and the rehabilitation of various cancelled male figures are any indication, lots of people harbor doubts about whether toxic men could or should be banished from society. So as we go along, we're going to see, are we actually able to uproot this toxic behavior? Are we able to uproot patriarchy? At Trump's inauguration, the guests included, we saw there was mixed martial arts fighters, Conor McGregor. We also saw Ultimate Fighting Championship chief executive, name was Dana White. Also the boxer and influencer Jake Paul and his brother Logan, we all know, and fighter and influencers. So sitting next to the presidents with his fellow billionaires, including Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, whose social media platform X has become a front page for reinvigorated masculinity. So there were many at the most important ceremonies in America's politics, not men from margins. It wasn't just ordinary men. There was a group of macho men that gathered to witness the rise of their leader. So the ascension of men's energy, just that energy and interest, is a recurring feature of American life, which actually ebbs and flows in response to the gains of feminism. So going back to Manosphere, Manosphere has built its audience in part by banishing the mainstream media. And liberals may not want to try to understand this world in depth for fear of actually encouraging ideologies they consider dangerous. So who's going to actually try and challenge this? Men have had every advantage of us women in telling their own story. Is this true or not? Like they say, this is a man's world. They've had their advantages. Education, for example, has been there such a much higher degree. The pen actually has been in their hands since those who wrote the laws, for example, those that wrote the poems, religious books, the philosophy, the history, and the scientific test were very largely men writing for their benefit of men. So where do the women fit in all this? Men have had every advantage of us in telling their own story. We have many examples of control over women's bodies, for example. We know that abortions. Who are the majority that's actually controlling this? It's men. The patriarchal world. It may all sound like doom and gloom, but it's actually the reality. And sometimes I guess that's why I decided to come and bring this again, because, you know, we women, we live this daily. It is the reality. So our voices need to be heard. That leads to the battle of our bodies. The book that has come out, Our Bodies, Their Battlefield. And I decided to read this book. But while I started reading this book, it was so intensified, I actually stopped. And I thought, my God, I cannot carry on. I need to pray. So I did pray and I asked God to give me the strength to carry on reading this book, to understand what is this battlefield all about. And I did. I haven't completed the book, but it was sufficient to the part that I actually got to. And it was actually really, really disturbing. So going forward, I will bring a bit about the book, but I will not go into detail because it's actually horrific. So patriarchy, there are so many different ideas about this extent and this force, a system of oppression built on misogyny and the exploitation and brutalization of women, which is a fact, it's a known fact. So I have a question. How different societies define and experience patriarchy? And in what ways does it manifest in everyday life? So how do different societies define and experience patriarchy? Patriarchy, number one. Would somebody like to respond to that? And we don't have to be afraid. Like I said, we're all here learning. We do not have right or wrong. So please do help. Let's participate.
So if I can
Gabriella.
comment, I'm going to do just a quick comment. Firstly, to me, something important that we always should remember is the fact that the personal is political. So when we're speaking about political, it's not something that's opposed to our life, to our daily lives. And when I think of society, we have a lot of men that they are able to recognize this hierarchy, and they see there's a gender problem in society, but usually they don't see themselves as the problem, so or agents of that problem. So usually they say not every man, but there is men involved. So for me, one of the recognition firstly comes importantly, because it's not only saying the personal is political, but then you don't view yourself as part of that problem by saying, okay, not every man is the same, but there's always a man involved in it.
Okay, thank you. Great. There's always a man involved in it. Anybody else? How do different societies define and experience patriarchy, and in what ways does it manifest in everyday life?
Hi, Gail.
Hi. And that is Debbie. No?
Pardon?
Is that Debbie?
No, it's Charity.
Charity. Hi, Charity.
Okay, so I'm trying to understand your question. So you're asking about how different societies experience patriarchy, right?
Define. Yes.
Define. Yeah, I guess that one would be a difficult question to answer. But I'm just thinking along the lines of, how we have looked at there's a model that Elder Tess once gave us about the manifestation of basically the King of the South, where she spoke about the King of the North and the King of the South, and how um, what do you call it? Like the control basically is on a spectrum, right? And it starts from the subtle one that's quite difficult to see, and to the full control where it's out there displayed and everyone can see it. And I'm thinking it might also look that way depending on the society and how they interact, basically men and women interact within that society. In some societies, there's certain things that are outright not not accepted, and then there is other societies where those things are quite normal. Like, for example, if you have people that come from Africa in certain communities, and then people that come from maybe Asia and some places that I might not even know, there is things that happen in those societies that um, are quite normal. But if you go into Europe and the Americas, it might not be accepted.
So
I
you're
think,
saying that it's a cultural thing as well.
yeah, I guess it goes down to culture as well, and how patriarchy can be defined. But
Mm-hmm.
I was just thinking also, this is a side thought, something I had in my mind, that I guess with patriarchy as well, with some people, it's mainly connected with just men. It's almost as if it's something that only happens with men. But also in other situations, or in the way other people see it, patriarchy is a system that has a de facto system that has been there in society, that has basically had both men and women participate, and thus both men and women have um, made the system go. Yeah.
Yes. Yes, I agree with you. Um, in society, yes, we have, because of the system, you have you have the men and the women that operate in the system. But you also get to a point where you see the dominance. Who's actually really dominating this system? And I guess that's why we push more onto the men. We know for a fact, yes, there are women that are role players, but the dominance of it is men. So would you agree that part of the idea of patriarchy is that this oppression of women is actually can also be multi-layered? It operates through, like we know, inequalities at the level of the laws and the states. And I guess, like, you what you brought, Charity, yes, I agree. But I want to go more. I want to push more. I actually want to push to the root cause of this whole toxic masculinity thing. So, but also through the home and the workplace as well, we find this always, even to the extent in our movement. It's not exempt. It is upheld by powerful cultural norms. Like, for example, the dowry, it's there. And I know people argue about, oh, what about matriarchal? Because we're patriarchal. Not even the one or the either or is good, and supported by tradition, education, and religion. So it becomes like a cultural norm, it's everything goes, it's fine. But it has a way of seeming to be natural. But if it's so natural, why is there so much suffering around the so-called natural behavior? So I was brought up, say for instance, a person will say, I was brought up like this. I was brought up like this. I was taught to be like this. I was taught to be the man and behave like the man. Okay. And most of it I've actually heard is that it's the mother's fault because this is how the mother brought the little boy up like this. So this brings in, it's like a sexist phrase. Boys will be boys, suggesting that sexist behaviors from men and boys are natural because boys will be boys. It is natural, serves no one and harms everyone, regardless of gender. And we know that. We've heard these terms like before, boys will be boys. We shouldn't actually excuse or normalize it because down the line, we'll see from as little to as adults, when we are adults, this toxic behavior continues. Boys and men are capable of change. Do you all agree or not? Boys, men, women, girls, we are capable of change. So we need to end this toxic culture. And how? It's very easy for me to sit and say, we need to end this. Debbie says, what drives a patriarchal system which fuels competition, oppression, is a dynamic relationship between control and fear. Yes, Debbie, and I agree. And fear is a very important word there because this actually drives in all these behaviors, especially for women, because of fear. So another phrase, she's asking for it. She's dressed like that. We start getting all these sexist behaviors coming out. So too often women and girls are blamed for sexual assaults and crimes committed against them. It is shocking and it's everywhere. And I'm sure you'll have heard this before, but I feel that I need to bring it because we live in our daily lives and we tend to forget these things because every day you see this happening to women. Oh, she asked for it. Why is she dressed like that? Why is she walking around at night at this time? Everything from the clothes they wear to the fact that they are out at night, time is scrutinized. So let us discuss this. Let's be clear that the only person responsible for sexual assault is the perpetrator. Do you all agree or not?
Agreed.
It's agreed, yes. Because I just want to, if Debbie continues, she writes, in other words, men control because they can. And I like that. They control because they can, because they've always had the privilege. They've always had the privilege. And because you can control, it is time that you need to help. So let's be clear, like I said, the only person responsible for sexual assault is the perpetrator. Don't play into this culture of victim blaming. What do we need to do? We need to call it out. We have to call it out. We are a movement, we're radical feminists, we need to call it out. So don't defend what has stripped women and girls of their freedom to be females. Don't allow yourself to feel that you are the perpetrator and not the victim. Call it out. Call the sin out. Another phrase that is often used is that, she's crazy. She's just crazy. Saying a woman is crazy is a way of discrediting them and undermining their reactions or their feelings. So the famous one, she's such a drama queen. She's such a drama queen. Calling a woman dramatic is highly stigmatizing. So I'm sitting here calling out these things and saying, this should not be. because women are just not accepting it. We're just not wanting to allow this anymore. Men who express emotion, frustration, or voice their concerns are unlikely to face the same criticism. So men, they can say and do whatever, but there will not be this type of criticism. Oh, she's just I'm not going to say, well, he's a drama queen, or whatever. No, but women, and they'd be called worse things. I don't even want to use those other things. So the fact is that women in general are discouraged from speaking out. It's a real world. And if they do, they may expect consequences. Sexual violence is clearly a means of controlling women. So now I want to dive into our bodies, their battlefield. And before I dive into this book, anybody wants to add anything or comment? Okay, I'll carry on. So the fact is that women in general are discouraged from speaking out. You may find women, yes, there's the odd woman out there that tries to be bold, but even when she tries to be bold, she will be called names. She's cat woman, she's this, she's that. There'll always be name calling. And if they do, they may expect, consequences. Like I said, sexual violence is clearly the means of controlling women. And that for me is one of the worst. So as I dive into Our Bodies, Their Battlefield, this book, which was written by Christine Lamb, which is an excellent book. I remember Elder Parminda had asked us to read this book. I thought it's a really good book. Christina Lamb has done the impossible and writing women into history, in-depth journalism. It's a powerful storytelling of real life situations. So for those that haven't read this book, this will also help, understand where I'm coming from. It's a wake-up call to all magnitude and horror of rape of women throughout history and the world. So I will not go into much details of these rapes because it can be really traumatizing. But I needed to address some of the highlighted things that take place, for example, in wars. These are just some of the highlighted things that take place in wars, but we know that these are things that take place around us as well, in our home, in our schools, around us. So I started reading the book, like I said, but I had to stop. And after I had prayed and read it again, I was encouraged and I continued. So it starts by, you have hidden the facts. Who are you that have hidden the facts? The government. The nation has hidden the facts. Who is the nation? The people. Sorry, I just needed to go back here. The people. I have hidden the facts. Me, the victim, living in the shadows, still a silent suffering. So these are the hidden scars that cause women to keep in silence. These are the hidden scars that cannot be spoken about. They are too much pain for many. But out there, you still will find a brave woman or girl willing to tell her story. There's still some brave woman that wants to tell her story. From one war to another, from Asia, Africa, Europe, the Western world, South America, etc., the battle actually continues. From the father next to you, or the brother, the uncle, the boyfriend, the neighbor, the battle continues. War in your own homes. When the war, for example, in Ukraine actually started, almost 90% of people fleeing the war were women and children. When I checked this, 90% of women and children fleeing these wars, I thought, day to day in our daily lives, we just live our lives, we see the news, and okay, we go to work, whatever we need to do. And sometimes we even forget, okay, there is a war going, or we remember there's a war going, but we forget of the hidden that are happening between this war that is taking place. These are the hidden stories that are taking place in these wars, on the front line, in the wars on your home. These are the hidden facts that do not get called out. So a wake-up call to the magnitude and the horrors of rape in wars. Rape in your own home is horrific. The world's most neglected war crime is rape. These women's stories will actually make you weep. And you know what? And then rage at the world's indifference. And when I was reading this, it actually made me weep, and it actually also made me rage. And am I allowed to rage? Yes, I'm allowed to rage. Why do I have to? First of all, because I'm a woman. Secondly, I am in a movement that understands these things. I'm in a movement that wants to make a difference in society. So Amel Clooney, we all know her. She says, these are the untold stories of war rape survivors and their lonely battle for justice in the war. Now imagine the lonely battle of women and girls around their atmosphere, their homes, their school, and there is no justice. How many times women keep silent just not to make the perpetrator look bad? How many times that women do that? Oh, I can't say this because this is going to make him look bad. So you live with all these scars all your life, and while the perpetrator gets off free. Question: how does the fear of making the perpetrator look bad? How does the fear of making the perpetrator look bad reinforce cycles of abuse and oppression?
Hello.
Hello.
So I guess so when you have a fear of making a perpetrator look bad, you remain in silence. You don't speak up. The person is not called out. And when you remain in silence, no one knows. No one knows that this person is an abuser,
Mm-hmm.
and they can go on to the next person and do it. And that person also keeps quiet, and it goes on to the next person, it goes on to the next person. And then it only takes maybe one person
Yes.
to say, this person has done this to me. And everyone will say, no, 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 that's a lie. This person has never done this. And then some other victims gain courage and start coming out. We have seen documentaries, for example, like, the singer R. Kelly,
Yes.
how he used to abuse
Mm-hmm.
uh, females.
Yes.
And it just took one person to be brave to say, this is what happened to me. And eventually, at first, that person suffers a lot of, brutality, and they continue fighting to say, this is what this person did to me. And then you start hearing of other cases coming up. Oh, there's this also someone from this location saying he did the same thing to me, and someone else comes. And then you end up having a chain of people coming up. And those other victims come up because they've gained strength from the first person who was able to speak up. So I'm just replying from what I've seen in documentaries,
Mhm.
that fear of saying something that and there always protects the abuser, the perpetrator, and they can go on and continue doing that. They're not called out, so they'll continue going on abusing. Um, yeah, so you're not doing any good to yourself and to the next victim.
I
Uh,
agree.
you might say, okay, I'm fine being quiet, I won't say it, but you're also not being fair to the next person, that this person is going to come along.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I don't know. Yeah.
No, I agree. I'm speaking to Melanie. No?
Primrose.
Primrose, yes, I agree with you. I do agree with you 100%. If we keep silence, besides you being the victim, the person that's continued does it, doing these things will never also change. Manjit, you've written there might also be Book of Genesis giving a mandate. Could you elaborate more on that, please?
It was in response to the comment made. So Debbie was saying, what drives a patriarchy system that fuels competition, oppression is a dynamic relationship. She said it's because they can, but I think it all stems from Genesis when God says that the woman will be subjected to the man. So I think that's what has given, right from the beginning, men the, I guess they see it as permission to oppress women. So that was just the comment I was making there.
Okay, thank you. Susan has written, we even told not to be hasty in sharing your story so as not to ruin a man's reputation. And that's definitely what continues every day. This is what happens. Gabriella?
I was just thinking, it's really common in when we're speaking about these things that we think about like drastic situations or what we call as drastic. Like for instance, you were talking about rape, all this type of physical abuse. But I also think it's important that we remember that violence sometimes come in what we think is the small jokes. For instance, sometimes we think violence can also come in tone of a joke. For instance, when you do a joke about women driving, or when you tell a woman, "Oh, leave that, I'll explain it to you." All these comments, that things that you say that you think that you are joking about, this is also a way of violence. So sometimes we think it's only in the big things, or what we call as big, of rapes and abuse and things like that, but it starts from the small things, the things that we call, or that we say that are oh, I was just joking, I was just joking with you, you take everything seriously, that's not what I meant. This is also another way of showing sexism, how it's so deeply rooted within us. It's so naturalized within us that we think that everything is a joke, and that these things, these simple things, that oh, men drive better than women, or I can't even say a joke because you take everything serious, or you're so dramatic, you're so hysterical. These things are how, for me, it leads to what we call the bigger things. It starts off with these small things.
Yes, thank you.
Yep.
Definitely.
Yeah, blessing as his hand up.
Yes, I did. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Sorry, I need to take you back a bit because my hand was raised in response to the question you asked. So could I ask you to ask the question again?
How does the fear of making the perpetrator look bad enforce cycles of abuse and oppression?
Right. Okay. Yeah. So I guess Rose already answered that question. I thought pretty well. I just wanted to add a different perspective to it, which is what prevents a lot of women from speaking out. So from testimonies and also material that I've read, gone through, a lot of women are discouraged to speak because when they do speak, they are not taken seriously. They're dismissed. And this is at all levels of society. So if in the family I'm abused by a family member, say my dad, and I'm a girl, woman, I speak to someone in the family, maybe my mom, someone else, and they dismiss it. They either don't believe me or they say, yeah, probably happened, but don't make a fuss of it, might not happen again, or it could end up destroying the family. So please don't say it. That's at a family level. You get to a societal level, institutional level. Women in court have not been taken seriously. There have been situations where war crimes have been prosecuted. I think that book speaks of them as well.
Yes, it does.
Situations where women would come up to the front and speak about all the abuses they went through during the war, and the judges would dismiss them. They'd say, what we are concerned about is torture and the killings. We're not interested in rape, for example, partly because you can't prove it. You don't have any evidence. It's anecdotal. It's just your experience, your word against theirs. And things like that tend to discourage women from speaking. So I'm not saying women shouldn't speak, but just pointing out some of the things that cause women to not want to speak. And
I understand.
And I guess it's good to be aware of that, because when we are then confronted with a situation where we are either listening to a woman telling us their story, or we have to encourage women to speak about their story, we need to do so with understanding. So sometimes we can get frustrated with women when you're like, okay, you've gone through this, speak out, and they can't. So we need to have that level of empathy and understanding that, okay, this person needs constant encouragement. You can't be frustrated with them and say they don't want help. They don't want to fix the problem. It's more complicated. It's not that straightforward. So that's what I wanted to add to that situation.
Thanks.
To that question.
Yes, thanks, Blessing. And I really do agree with that. Women, they do need to be encouraged. They really do need the help, because women even go to psychologists just because of that as well, because I'm afraid to speak out. So there's always extra help that you have and that you can have. Gabriella?
I was just listening to Blessing, and this is why I was pointing out before that this fear comes out because if in the small instances women are trying to point out their problems or put out their opinion, their thoughts, and if in these small instances around men you don't feel comfortable and they put it and they view it or they tell you this is a joke or just in small conversations in your daily life with friends, with boyfriends, ex-boyfriends, fathers, whoever it is, men around you. If in the small things you are trying to express yourself and you already shut down, or people make you seem that what you're saying, it's not truthful enough, it's not, they don't validate what you are saying. How are you going to be comfortable enough, to bring out the bigger things? So this is why I was pointing out that start off by looking at the small things that happen around you, how you react to these small things, so that when bigger things come to you, you know how to react to them as well.
Okay, I'm going to, because I don't know how I'm doing for time at the moment, so I'm going to continue. Let us try and keep our responses shorter as well. Not that I don't want to, it's just because of timekeeping. So let us, if I ask a question, let's just get to the point. I know these topics are wonderful to have longer time, but let us try and keep it short so everybody can also participate as well. So for millennia, actual mass rape has been a weapon of war, but the testimony of abuse is almost entirely absent from all recorded history, like Blessing was saying. Silence is a woman's worst enemy, and this is what I find. Whether she's a housewife or whatever, I think it's her worst enemy. So another question is, have there been historical or cultural shifts in how women's voices are received when they speak out against wrongdoing? And I think Rose had started off with something like that as well. You know, we get our family members, like Blessing was talking about, you know, women's voice silent. You got to be quiet as well. So yes, especially in culture, we have that. So let's also, as I said about this, let's think about this question not only in the context of war, but in our reality as a movement. How do we treat women around us? We need to think about that. How do we treat women, mothers, wives, girlfriends, ex-girlfriends, sisters, etc.? We need to think about these things. So during the war, soldiers would come to the victim's house and confiscate their phones. Then they will ask the victim to actually tie a sheet on her front fence as if they were marking it. So these soldiers would come back and gang rape these women. And at times they would actually kill their husbands as well. So these are things that actually take place in wars that we don't see, or most of the time we don't even hear about. So in the Ukraine war, like I said, I'm not going to go into detail. I'm just going to throw out a little bit. In the early hours of the 24th of February, 2022, the people of Ukraine had woken up to the sounds of explosion and rocket strikes. And we know that. Putin had then sent 150,000 soldiers on the country's borders. The US had warned was the biggest mobilization of the troops since the Second World War. Almost no one had imagined he would actually invade. So imagine this was the biggest troops that were sent, and imagine what happened to many women and girls. There has, of course, always been rape in war. It seems to have reached an epidemic in the last 8 years. These are the words of Emil Clooney. And this is so recent. In the last 8 years, we're talking about an epidemic. Over and over again, ethnic and sectarian groups as well have used rape as a weapon. And, you know, I actually personally never thought that rape would be a weapon. Never, you know. I know we as women, you're just scared of the word rape, but being a weapon, it's even worse. And not just to humiliate or terrorize communities, but to wipe out what they see as rival ethnicities and non-believers. So this was going on in their minds when they got out to war. It's not just about, you know, we're taking our enemies out, the enemies, but the women in the front there amongst these wars, we become the biggest enemies, the biggest victims that are going to the survivors that are going to have to live with it for the rest of their lives. Because there are some that did not survive these rapes. So when hearing of reports from Ukraine about these rapes, it's impossible not to think of the rapes in other war zones. For example, at home or wherever, you know, it's impossible. Also, when German women being raped by their Soviet forces during the liberation of the Berlin at the end of the Second World War, this was in 1945, the Red Army's mass rapes committed, as many as 2 million women were raped. 2 million women. This is a huge amount, huge amount. It did not end there, but spread right through the Hungarians, the Serbs, Ukrainians, and even the Soviets' own women. So it doesn't matter. As long as you're just a woman, then you just need to be that victim. For example, in Ukraine, a special hotline was set up for psychologists, counseling callers, horrific stories of mothers and daughters of rapes of ages of 15 to 17 years being raped. The soldiers will not even rape a girl because they said at times, you know, sexism will come into it. Oh, you're too ugly. Imagine, you're too ugly. I'm not even going to rape you. So these are horrible things that, like Gabriella says, sometimes we use, I would say, subtle sexism, things that we subtly say that we think do not affect, especially, I know sexism is general, but especially women and girls. These are the things that end up getting to these huge mass rapes and these horrific things. So we really need to be very careful in our atmosphere, our friends, our workplace, our families. We need to stand against these things, because if our test is gender, we need to remember that these things are happening and these things are real. These are deliberate weapons of terror, and most of these rapes were gang rapes, and that is horrific. Weapons of terror. And we know that. We see it on YouTube everywhere. They would say, oh, I would do this to you. Knowing for a fact that this is a woman's fear, our worst nightmare. Horrific. Many teenagers had been left pregnant. Amongst them, a 14-year-old girl left pregnant because of these horrific things. And going back to the abortion stories that today that women are still fighting for, doctors had advised against abortion during this time of the war period where these women were raped, arguing it might affect her ability to have children later. Imagine, she's 14 years old. This will affect her in later. Do you even think, first of all, you got to think, will she even survive the pregnancy? And if she does, will she even want to have children or a relationship ever again? So what is so wrong with this statement? What is so wrong with the statement that this doctor made? You know? And we know, we've learned as a movement about abortion and how women go through the suffering, whether it's rape and we're not allowed to take control of our own bodies. We see the fight against abortion so dominant, and it's actually getting worse because it's the men that actually take the control. They're the ones that give the orders. And if that woman that's on the side of that man that gives that orders, obviously she's also afraid. And obviously she's also been indoctrinated for years in the patriarchal system. And many of these rapes were done in front of family members and publicly. And this happens all the time.
Yeah.
Many, yes, blessing.
Sorry.
Yes.
No, you can finish your. Yeah.
Please do speak.
Okay. I just wanted to comment on what you said about rape and the, you know, the statement that was said that you're too ugly to be raped. You know, and that has been a popular line with people when it comes to rape, that people are raped because they look beautiful. It's an issue of lust, but it's not an issue of lust.
Mm-hmm.
It's an issue of control, whether it's, you know, the one extreme, which is rape, or a little lower down in the spectrum, like sexual assault, or, so, you know, or even suggestive comments. All those are not based on, you know, this person was irresistible to me. I looked at them and they looked beautiful, they looked attractive. The issue is about power and control. And I think
Yes.
that book brings it out really well, that Rape
Yes.
is a weapon of terror, like we said. It's meant to bring people into submission. It's meant to stop them from having a normal life. It's actually designed to do that.
Yes.
So it's not an issue where someone says, I liked you and I couldn't help myself. And that would be the same with sexual assault, like groping or unsolicited, unwanted touching, or even comments, comments about a woman's body or appearance in an inappropriate situation. Like you're not in any kind of relationship and you're speaking about how a person looks. Because I think even if some things are inappropriate. However, the point I just wanted to make is the common underlying theme with all these different things is power. It's men doing these things because they think they are in control. They think they have the power.
Yes.
And I think that's the underlying problem that we face, where the powerful domineer the vulnerable or the weak, whatever powerful means and whatever weak means, because it can mean different things in different contexts. But you see that pattern repeated in every scenario, where you've got someone who's powerful domineering someone who's weak.
Yes. Yes. Excellent. Yes, exactly. You take that power as a male power and what's more shocking as well, Blessing, is that whether you're 20 years old or 19 years old and you're male, you already know you have that power. You already know you have the power and you can do that because that is the woman's fear. So you're going to use that weapon against her. So it's not even an age thing. And that is so shocking as well. So she becomes just an object. Show her off, which becomes a woman and a girl's nightmare. Because even if she is dressed up and she has, for example, a mini skirt, and something does happen to her, she gets raped. And they say the normal thing is, why were you dressed like that? First of all, she had on clothes. You are the perpetrator, stripped, just looking at her, first of all, you stripped the clothes off her. Just actually at the beginning, just looking at her, you stripped the clothes to then afterwards take total control. So it's a mindset. It's your mindset. It's the power in that mind. And can it be controlled? Of course, yes. Richard, may your voice and influence increase much and be effective in current lasting change. The word rape did act as a trigger for me for many years, till recently, as my school girlfriend was raped in her own bedroom in 1987. And these are the things, Richard, that we are now calling out, and we're saying that it is unacceptable because these are nightmares that continue forever. Many were young soldiers, ages between 20 and 25. The worst soldiers that came from the Russian units, the book says, served in these places, Ipan and Busham, where the rapes of these women were, listen to this part carefully, where the rapes of these women were rewarded with medals by Putin on their return home. They had medals. They did a great job. No, we did what we had to do. And part of what they had to do was do these mass rapes. Some soldiers' wives had even been encouraging them. Like I said before, why would these women encourage them? Of course, they are fearful of these men. These are men in power. One apparently telling her husband, go there and rape Ukraine women. Just don't tell me anything. So that alone, by her saying to her husband, don't tell me anything, it's like blocking my ears. It's a nightmare. I'm a woman. I can't hear this. But it's fine. Just go and do it, but just don't tell me. Fear. Why do you think these women will do that, do these things? Perhaps the prevalence of rape by Russian troops could be linked to high rates of violence against women at home. Yeah, they go through these things at home as well. Because domestic violence is not criminalized in Russia. It's part of the social norms in Russia. So, of course, they would encourage that it's normal. This is what they say in Russia. Beat those closest to you, so strangers are afraid of you. So kids grow up thinking it's normal, and in the army, even worse. To bring these soldiers to justice has been difficult. The writer says if there was one positive about what happened in Ukraine, it was that this time it was widely reported and there seemed a real determination to act. Zelensky spoke of the rapes in the same breath as torture and killing, unlike many male leaders who have tended to regard rape as a side issue. It's all over. The stories of the titles like The Girl I Once Was. The Girl I Once Was. This title alone was heartbreaking for me. It's a never-ending pain because this voice is crying out and saying, the girl that I once was, and now I'm no more. I'm basically just living to live. So it's the daily sexism, daily misogyny that we live with daily, that break us down daily. These are the things that men need to see. These are the things and behaviors we cannot go through. So the author states, I am writing a book about rape in war. It's the cheapest weapon known to man. It devastates families and empties villages. It turns young girls into outcasts who wish their lives over when they have hardly begun. Now, that is also sad. These young girls wish their lives were over when their lives haven't even begun. It begets children who are daily reminded of their mother's ordeal and are often rejected by the community and bad blood. So I am coming to a conclusion. Ever since man has gone to war, he has helped himself to women, whether to humiliate his enemy, wreak revenge, satisfy his lust, like Blessing was talking about lust, or just because he can. I can do it. Just because he can indeed rape is so common in war that we speak of the rape of a city to describe its cruel destruction. That today it is normal to hear somebody saying, well, she's my wife, I can rape her. Like it's a natural thing. And not only war all around us. Every single woman that has gone through these terrible ordeals, that have chosen not to go into detail, you won't find these women's names in the history books or on the war memorials that we pass through daily. But
Sorry,
these,
just to let you know, you've had an hour.
okay, thank you. But they are the actual real heroes. So a conclusion. These wars, we condemn the international community and the UN because they just stood by, these women say, and watched us be raped. And the same things are happening over and over again around the world, said one of the victims. Some of these women who survived say, you may think we are the lucky ones because we survived the genocide and were not diseased, but we are dead women walking. Rape is worse than killing someone, says a victim, because I have to live with it every day.
Sorry, I've just got some comments. I don't know if you want me to read those out.
Please do, please do.
Okay, bear with me.
I will.
Susan says we have been even told not to be hasty in sharing your story so as not to ruin a man's reputation. A woman's place is to support the key patriarchal illusion that men are independent and autonomous. When women challenge stereotypical feminine ways of acting, it makes it harder for men to see themselves clearly as men. And Susan put psychological abuse. Rose has said, after speaking up, the stigma a woman will face is horrific. Both women and men will treat the victim with brutality. Susan adds, after I responded to a comment in the Bible study group recently, I received private responses that shows that our environment, unfortunately, is not a safe place to be open about their experiences within the movement.
Thank you for that. So after all this, these are my words. I'm not free until other women are not free, even though their chains are different from mine. So I think, you know, as a woman and as the men in this movement, we really need to, in our environment, wherever we are, stand up for what is not doing good in society. We say patriarchal is rooted, but if you learn about certain roots, you can start digging out the roots that are trying to get deeper, and we can try and uplift those roots. We work in a system, yes, the patriarchal system, but how do you work in that system? You don't enter that system if it's toxic. While you're in that system, uproot those roots, because it is possible. We cannot just lift our hands up and say it's impossible. It's deeply rooted. No. We need to do something within the system. So how can men fight for women's rights within the system? I'll leave that for you all to think about. Or could I just have that minute for you all to answer that question? Debbie?
Can you repeat that question again? Sorry.
How can men fight for women's rights within the system?
I think I was reading, I did a study once, and I can't remember, I've got the study to hand now. There were men, believe it or not, who were speaking up, even though they are in the minority. And he was in the 1800s, believe it or not. He was actually sticking up for women and helping them to get further. I can't even remember what it was. I'll have to get back to you on that one, Gloria. I think that what men are against are their own kind. I think if you're not patriarchal, or if you're not one of them, you are an outcast. So I think they are in a predicament. Not that I'm saying I agree with patriarch, but they're in a predicament themselves. I think they're finding it hard to get out of that patriarchal system because you're thought of as sissy or whatever names that they can think of, or wuss. You know, if you're caught coming away from this manly sort of patriarchal system and sticking up for women, which is what God wants. I think at the end of the day, that's what God wants is to educate men to understand the system that they're in, so that they can talk against it and stand up for women as well. But I think that a lot of men are caught up in, like I said, this manly role that they've got to look. If you see hundreds of men that they go to the gym, they want to build themselves up and they want to be this warrior and carer of the family. And I think what they finding difficult is that when that it's almost like they feel vulnerable coming out of that way that they're supposed to portray to society. And I think that when they're challenged with that, they find it hard. Well, think when they come out of it, they think, well, what am I supposed to be now? I'm supposed to be the provider of the family. I'm supposed to be this carer, and all this. Where do I fit in? I think there's a lot of things that challenge their minds, and therefore I think it's very difficult for them to even think about coming out of it all. But there are men who do it, but they, like I said before, they are definitely in the minority.
Yes, they are definitely in the minority. And the thing of the... Sorry, was that Blessing?
Yeah, I just wanted to add something, but you can
Okay,
speak.
please do. No, you can. Go ahead.
Well, I wanted to answer your question and say, I think the first thing that men can and should do to be supportive of women's rights is educating themselves on feminism, because I feel like there has been a lot that has been said about feminism, which is just not correct. So, it has been represented as a movement of angry,
Yes.
irrational women
Yes.
who hate men. But feminism it includes women's rights, and women's rights are very important. But it's not limited to women's rights. It's actually a proposal to reorganize society as a whole, and it includes everyone's rights.
That's it.
So, of course, there's if you get into the details, it's a lot more complicated than I'm saying. But I think it is helpful if men are going to actually be supportive, to actually understand what feminism is to begin with, because
Thank
only
you.
when you understand what feminism is and you understand what of fighting against, then you can more meaningfully participate in being supported.
Definitely.
I just want to say something as well.
Yes, Charity.
So I was just thinking it's really important that as we go through this, I think something that would help us, especially in the movement, is to see that when we speak about misogyny and we speak about patriarchy and all of these things, it's not something that only women should take up because they're the ones who are affected, but it's something that everyone should take up, men and women, because it affects all of us. First of all, it has affected how men have seen themselves, and they've continually wanted to live up to that idea of what a man is, and it has put them in a place where they have to look at women in the way that they do, and in the same way with women. And as we are going to learn and discuss together, we also listen to each other's stories, men taking time to understand what women go through and why women are the way they are, because in so many ways sometimes it makes it seem like women tend to, I don't know, it makes it seem like men are the more natural leaders, and they're the ones who think better, understand things better, and all of that, and not understanding why women tend to struggle within society, whether it's education or whatever is happening within society, that makes it seem like it's harder for them to come up. And if we actually have that conversation or talk to them, try to understand what happens with them, it would be of help to bring us all up together, especially the women, of course. And I feel if we are going to work together, feminism is not going to be seen as something that's just a women's movement, but a human's movement.
It's a human's movement, and I agree with you, because we got to work together. This thing I've too many times heard is of the fact that, it's just too hard. We can't do it. For me, I just can't swallow that. Let's work together. We can do it together. And it just reminds me of a podcast that I saw. And Debbie, I'm so sorry, I'm going to soon end. Where this guy, he apologizes. He says he was listening to about menopause. And then he says, my goodness, I lost my best friend through divorce because I did not understand what she actually was going through. But now, just learning and listening to about all this about menopause, he's divorced because why? He was not educated about menopause and what his ex-wife was actually going through, that he actually divorced her because of that. So I think patriarchy and all these things are the same thing. If we want to, and men are willingly and women are willingly to gather and continue saying that, yes, we can do something about it, I think the world, we will have some form be able to breathe. Gabriella.
Can I comment on what Susan wrote in the chat, that
Yes.
she made a comment on a movement platform, and she got private messages probably commenting on her. I don't know the details of what came into her inbox, but it suggested that it was more like a backlash on what she had openly said on a platform. In as much as you see, you cannot control every discussion on a platform, but I also want to think, before really looking out what we can do in the world and everything, I think to start with the movement, what can we do if someone talks of abuse? You know, I know someone who was abused by their partner, and when they spoke up, there were some people that told her that you should not have spoken up. You know, some of these things you should just keep them. You know, so there's somewhere where we can start.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if your comment is going to discourage a woman to speak up and talk about what she has gone through, then I think it's best to keep quiet, because the effect of you as a member of the movement also saying to that woman, oh, you shouldn't have, you know, some of these things, you shouldn't talk about them. You shouldn't air your dirty laundry in public. Or, you know, it is actually discouraging to any other woman that wants to speak up about any certain abuse, you
I
know.
agree with you. I
So,
agree.
so for me, when I read that comment in the chat, it just triggered some things I have had the privilege of knowing in the past, where when someone speaks up and maybe a certain discipline is taken against the partner, you know, women will rise up to start lashing that woman, that victim, to say, why were you saying, talking about your issues? Look, now your partner is in trouble. You know,
Mm.
that's unacceptable.
It's
That is
unacceptable.
damaging. That is damaging, and that destroys, and that even hinders other women from speaking up. That's a terrible sin. If you have nothing positive to say, it's better you keep quiet, you know, than to let an abuse go on, and a perpetrator trying to protect a perpetrator not to be exposed. That's the worst crime you can do.
Thank you, Gabriella.
I was reminded about Elder Parminder's recent study in the UK, and I don't remember the question exactly. I don't know if it was how should we live like radical feminists. How do we behave as radical feminists? Something to that effect. And I thought it was a really nice question. But what worried me was when it was time to answer that question, because it seemed like most people, and it's not a criticism, but I think this is what happens to us in general. We don't know how to answer this question. And one of the reasons is then later on, another study happened in France, and it was mentioned about the platinum rule, I think it was, which I thought it was really nice. And I think if we apply that rule of putting yourself into the other person's position, in the other person's place, then we are going to start, we will be able to start answering a little better this question about how do you behave as a radical feminist. Until you don't put yourself in the other person's position, whether it's a man or a woman, until you don't put yourself into the other person's position, you will never be able to understand what they go through. And even though I know our experiences are different, and they probably will always be different, the fact that you try to put yourself in the other person's position, I think it's already a step to be able to answer these questions. Not only how do you behave as a radical feminist, but also how men can fight for women's rights within the system. And I think obviously I would like to hear more men speaking and answering these things than women, because it seems that women are the ones that mainly speak about these things, you know, but it's also nice to listen to men's opinion, to see how far they have come with their opinions and their thoughts about these things. So this is one of the suggestions for me. Using the platinum rule would be one of the ways of men probably being able to fight for women's rights within the system.
Okay, I'm going to close because
Sorry, Curtis did have his hand up there, and I know Gabriella just mentioned wanting to hear men's opinions, but he couldn't get a word in.
Okay, so let's give him a go then. Curtis, sorry, we didn't see your arm. I hope it's not sore.
This is just going back a few comments earlier. I think the question was how do men work within the system? Was that it correctly?
Yes.
And Gabriella just brought up the study that was done a few weeks back, and what came to mind was like for me at least, when I think of the comment work within the system, I don't necessarily think it's related to just take the abuse within the system and go on with the flow. It's more so related to seeing how the system affects the personal. So again, Gabriella spoke about the personal is political, how the political affects the personal lives of women. And so one of the ways in which you do that is the easiest one to think of to go to is voting. It's a mechanism that's designed by the system. And so for me, when I think of work with the system, it's talking about using the mechanisms of the system to resolve a problem. And so it would be, changing laws and etc., using the mechanisms that the system gives you to achieve what feminism is fighting for, equality under the law. And then once that's achieved, as I think it was Blessing brought up, or might have been Gabrielle, I can't remember specifically, but talking about how having equality under the law doesn't address privilege, where women and men can be seen as equals under the law, but one still has more social privilege. And so to round up everything that I was saying, to try and answer the question, my perspective of that is it's not necessarily accepting the system for what it is. It's using the mechanisms that the system gives you to achieve those goals of what we would say is equality under the law.
Thank you for that, because that's the way I thought about it as well. It's about using that mechanism within the system, how to get to where we actually want to get. Was there somebody else that actually wanted to say something before I pray? No? I want to thank you.
Sorry, Debbie put in the chat, men who actively supported feminists were Frederick Douglass, Henry Blackwell, Thomas Wentworth.
Hello.
They were feminists in the 1890s. Can you hear me? Sorry. Is it back? And clearly, unless men in that time had supported women, they wouldn't have got anywhere, because the men were the ones with the power. And that's the same today. I think what Curtis is saying about the men working within the system, unless a good body of the people who are in power support the change, it's not going to happen. And so I guess that's the conflict we're facing, is that it's just, as you've been saying, deep rooted, that it's very hard to change that whole system from the top down.
Exactly. It's just like those that do get in and, within the system is trying to do something about it, and not just throw their hands up and say, well, it is what it is. I guess that's it. Did somebody else want to say something?
Yes. Hello.
Hello. Yes, I'm listening.
Okay, yeah, it's Nyasha here. So I'm late for the lesson, but I've managed to pick up something. What I wanted to say is that I think women want to speak up, but sometimes, okay, there are some who are afraid to speak up, right? And then there are some who want to speak up, but they don't have anywhere to speak up to. Like sometimes you don't trust the people maybe that are around you, and you fail to speak up because you don't have that trust in anyone. So I think also it's an encouragement to maybe people in this movement and the lessons that we're getting, that we should also be in a position whereby we are reachable as well, and people are able to open up to us and also be able to help the people through the lessons that we're getting. That's my contribution.
Thank you very much on that. That's very important, that as a movement that we can still use our voices. We do have our leaders are there to listen. We do not have to be afraid. That is why we're in this movement. You know, we may have difficulties. It always also starts within. So within we can make things better. And that's why I guess each and every one of us are chosen in this movement. So with this, I want to thank each and every one of you for participating. And even those that haven't said much, just being here was awesome. I want to thank Elder Emma as well for having me here. Let us close in prayer. Lord, we want to thank you once again for this privileged moment that we could have as a group, coming to speak about all the things that women especially go through, patriarchy and everything around it. We want to ask you, Lord, to help us and strengthen us day by day, and not to fear, but to speak, to trust one another in this movement. Cleanse us and guide us and lead us. Help us in times of fear. Help us, Lord Jesus, when we don't know where to turn to, guide us as well. I ask you to continue strengthening this group as well, that they may continue in unity, uplifting each other. Be with us for the rest of the day. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.